This is Tim Neverett, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
One of my favorite things about the Dodgers, I'm not a Dodger fan, but I've had a little bit of inside access because of my ridiculous show. And I got to see Mike Brito one day, behind the scenes, and it cracked me up. He had both his World Series rings on. I don't know why, if it was just like World Series ring day for him every day or whatever.
Every day.
But he, if I'm standing up straight right now, right, he wore his two rings on his ring and his pinky finger. And they were so heavy, apparently, caused him to lean. It cracked me up. It was like, these are the heaviest rings in the world. I'm a two-time world champion. I just always got such a kick out of that. Like, he's got these great rings and this, iconic look and everything. You must meet so many characters in your line of work.
Yeah, well, Mike was one of them. Yeah, that's true. There's a ton of characters in baseball, no matter where you go. So, I think of this mostly from, for me, mostly from the scout side of things, reporter side of things. There are people you become friendly with over the years just because you've been around and you've seen them a long time. So, because it's an everyday kind of thing too, baseball is a sport that attracts characters. I think, not that other ones don't, they do.
Right.
But I think because of the everyday nature, you see these characters more and more often. And, Dodger Stadium has their share, I'm sure. When Mike was with us, it was good to see him and good to talk to him. He would be in the press room most of the time when I'd see him at Dodger Stadium. But he's a presence that's missed for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I had the singer from Mariachi Garibaldi. If everybody not watching, Mariachi Garibaldi is sort of like the house mariachi band for the Dodgers. At least they have been for a number of seasons. And that's another thing, right? This is not a normal gig. So you're a mariachi band, and now you're playing for, what would be this year, 4 million fans if you played every night. They don't play every night, but it's such an incredible thing. You do collect characters. You collect these people like DJ Severe. And there's all these little jobs where you can become a personality within this big brand, but also external of it as well too. It's a remarkable machine. It works really well here. Why doesn't it work in places like, I don't know, you worked in Pittsburgh. Is it the same, or is it a lower level of that, or is it just not enough people? Or what's the difference between like a Pittsburgh and an LA?
It's the same, but on a smaller scale. You're there every day. It's the same thing. Everybody's trying to accomplish the same thing. The ballpark is smaller. The market is smaller. Their attendance generally is not what the Dodgers is. Dodgers lead the world in attendance in any sport. So, averaging 45,000 a game. You get over 4 million in a season. That's incredible. Not too many. I look back at the Rockies that did that, but they played in an 80,000 seat stadium. Yeah. They were a brand new team, and they were getting 80,000 a game for their first year. So they set attendance records that'll never be broken. Now they're playing in a much more reasonably sized, 49,000 or 50,000. I think they took some seats out, but about 50,000 seats in Colorado now. So they won't even touch their own record. They can't, even if they sold out every single game for an entire season. But yeah, there's definitely characters. I mean, you talk about people from the clubhouse guys and the equipment guys and the trainers and the people that are there, that some of the ushers, usually you get to know some of them, people who operate the elevators, you see them every day. There's a guy who's at the bottom of the elevator at Dodger Stadium, at the bottom of the escalator at Dodger Stadium behind home plate. His name's Ray. We see him every day. And it's basically a routine. When Rick and I are finished with dinner, we go to the bottom of the escalator to go up. We give knuckles to Ray, and he tells us how many people are going to be there that night. So it's just, it's just one small example. But you have people you see every day, and you get used to them. But people around the ballpark are a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. And again, my little minor interactions in there, you definitely see that. I went to an A's game. My buddy Phil has been at Dodger Stadium and thrown out the first pitch. Him and his family said, "It's time for Dodger baseball." But he had ALS, and we came for ALS Day. But we were in Oakland one time, and they had these security guards. And so we walk up, and I'm Phil's arms and legs at this point. He can drive his wheelchair and everything, and we kind of come a little past last minute to get to the game because logistics and stuff. And we have the hardest time getting in. Just the ticket lady's like, no, I want to sell you tickets. It's no big deal. So I kind of scooch the barrier so I can go through, like the metal barrier that kind of corrals everybody because there's nobody there. Like the game has begun. And the security guard's like, hey, you can't do that. You have to walk all the way around. I'm like, this is my man right here. He's not going to go anywhere. I'm going to just, and so like all this kerfluffle, this other guard comes up and he's like, hey, how can I help you? And he is like speed walking, amped up, supercharged guy. And I'm like, this guy's a real character. And so I asked around, and sure enough, like everybody, I don't forget what his name is, Tim or something, but he was a guy that everybody would talk about in Oakland because of his high energy, positive nature. Yeah, you're right. The game is full of these people. Does football, I mean, ice skating has characters for sure, but do the other sports have the same level of characters, or is this a baseball thing?
I think it might be a baseball thing again because of the everyday nature of it. Obviously football has characters, hockey does, basketball does. People that work in arenas that work, they'll be there for every event, whether it's, hockey or basketball or whatever, concerts, they're characters all over sports. And that's kind of the beauty of it. And one thing that's sort of comforting too is like, we travel, go to place to place to place, and we see some of the time, sometimes we see some of the same people every single year. One of the guys, like we go to Philadelphia, right where we are, right where the team is now. Yeah. And in the press room, the guy that does it's the only press room that has hand scooped ice cream. And there's been a guy there for years, and we call him Frankie Two Scoops. And Frankie is like, he knows everybody, and everybody knows Frankie. And when you walk in there, hey, Frankie, you haven't seen him in a year. He's like, he knows your name. And, he's got a whole list of ice creams that are really cool. It's like going to Baskin Robbins. And, it's not complete unless you go see Frankie Two Scoops. Your trip is not complete. There's another gentleman there that opens and closes the window in the broadcast booth for you. And he's a really good guy, and he's been there as long as I can remember. And he's got this really, really thick Philly accent. So it's really fun to talk to him. He's a dyed-in-the-wool guy. That's just Philadelphia. That's there are other people like, you go to Cincinnati, for example, people who've been on the television crew there that will work on the visiting crew. So in other words, when we go in and televise, they're the home plate cameras in your booth. That same guy's been in there, gosh, I don't know, 25 years now. And, you get to know him over the years, and there's utility people that are there. I mean, that's where they work. They make their living at the ballpark doing different things. And when you travel around Major League Baseball, you get to know all these people, whether by accident or osmosis or whatever. But it's a lot of fun, and I always enjoy going back. That's why I like the traveling part of it, because you get to see some familiar faces over time, and you develop, friendly relationships with them.
Will you indulge me while I tell you a Dodger story? I think this is funny. So Phil and I, again, ALS, we're there for ALS Day. He's the guy that they honor that day. So it's June 2nd, 2023. And before the game, because of the people he knows, he gets to go into the Yankees tunnel back towards the clubhouse and meet with Garrett Cole and Aaron Judge. I swear to God, all this stuff's true. And Aaron Judge says to Phil, hey, I'm going to hit you 2 home runs today. Aaron Judge did not hit 2 home runs that day. Mookie Betts hit 2 home runs. Do you know what happened the very next day? Aaron Judge broke his toe. Because Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig are like, no, sir, you have to pay off when you do that. It's just I don't know if those ghosts did that thing, but it's just such a funny coincidence that when you make that promise against the Yankees, but their, history, that that Aaron Judge has to sit down for 2.5 months. I'm not excited about any player getting injured, but it's just a funny thing that baseball has these coincidences that happen all the time where, you have this thing. Mookie Betts hits 2 home runs. Aaron Judge doesn't. Mookie Betts is not a big dude. Aaron Judge is his hero. And I love Aaron Judge, but it's just baseball's full of these coincidences and great stories.
Yeah, there's tons of them. I mean, with Mookie, for example, when he was drafted, he was not considered a power hitter, right? He was a second baseman, and they had hoped he'd turn into something. They knew he could field. They knew he was a great athlete, but he played, infield. Gosh, I can't remember when they moved him to the outfield. I want to say he might have been in high A or by the time he got to double A.
Right.
But he'd never hit home runs in his life. He had never done that. And something clicked one year. His body matured, his swing got better, the bat speed picked up. And one year in the minor leagues, he hit a couple of home runs, and he said, wow, now I kind of get how you can do this. And by the time he got to, through double A and into triple A with the Red Sox organization, the power stroke was there too. And he had moved to right field because they saw a need at the major league level for an outfielder. And I remember the first time I saw him was in spring training, I want to say in 2010, maybe, or 2010 or 11, somewhere in there, maybe later. But it was in a spring training game in Florida, and I saw the lineup, and I said, Mookie, I know Mookie Wilson, but I didn't know there was another Mookie. And so then I started figuring out who he was and learned who he was, and then saw him play a little bit. I'm like, wow, this kid's pretty good. And I think he began the year in AAA, and then he came up to the big leagues, and the rest was history. But now, and I've seen him hit 3 home runs in a game. In fact, he's done it 6 times. I've been there 5 times because of the time I was with him in Boston. And he did it in LA too. Last time I think was 2020. He had a 3 homer game. But his next one, he'll be the only guy in Major League history with 7. He's tied the Major League record. So somehow, some way, he's developed that bat speed. And at the beginning of this season, that was part of his issue, was his bat speed. They have tools that measure bat speed, and they discovered his was down from where it had been. So now it seems to be back up, and as a result, he's producing, and that's what they need right now this time of year is him, especially Mookie. They need him producing out of that 2 spot.
Yeah, for sure. Just get on base and do his job with that. That's a huge thing. He also got super sick, right? This was an expected thing from my point of view. When I look at baseball, I'm like, oh man, you lose all that weight. Yeah, you're going to get a lot of it back fast, but your body has changed during that time, and it's very likely that affected him.
And he pushed it too. He went to Japan. He flew to Japan with the team, and was too sick to play, and they sent him back home. I'm not sure how, if they put him on a commercial flight or not. I never asked him, but they sent him home. And then I asked him how, when I reconnected with him after the Japan trip, I said, how's the weight? How are you feeling? And he said, he told me he was crushing Uncrustables. He said he was eating Uncrustables, all day just to try to put weight back on. And it wasn't the same. Plus the fact he works really hard early every day. He's out in the field. He's in the batting cage. When you're working that hard, it burns off all those calories. So he never really got a chance to catch up fully, I don't think, with his weight and his strength for a while. Now he's back. Now he's looking. He's not looking as thin as he was at the beginning of the year. He looks more like the old Mookie now.
Yeah. By the way, Jimmy Rollins, saw him in the elevator when he's with the Dodgers. I'm like, oh my God, because I'm not the world's biggest guy, but I'm pretty tall. I'm about 6 foot and pretty strong. And I'm like, I cannot believe that guy can hit a ball 100 feet farther than me. It's just crazy to see that.
Yeah. Well,
I'd be lucky to hit the ball over 330. I'd be lucky to do that. He could just bomb the ball.
Well, same, Jimmy Rollins, same thing. I mean, Jimmy's not a big guy at all, but he could generate bat speed. And that's the whole thing. If you can generate bat speed and that translates into back spin, you're going to hit home runs. I mean, Jose Altuve, right? Big example there. That guy can hit bombs, but he also is in a very right-handed friendly ballpark in Houston, where they have the Crawford boxes down the left field line. And I saw him hit 3 in a game in the playoffs. When I was with Boston, he hit 3 off of Chris Sale. Yeah, that was 2017. So you can draw your own conclusions. Everybody talks about the World Series when Houston knew what was coming, but the Yankees still complain about it. And so do the Red Sox, because they played the Red Sox, then the Yankees. And people always wondered why Joe Kelly was throwing behind Carlos Correa in the postseason when he was with the Dodgers. They're like, well, he wasn't even with the Dodgers. No, he was with the Red Sox 2 series before, and he doesn't forget, right? So
right.
People forget they did play other teams that postseason. And I watched him and Alex Bregman go back to back at the beginning of a game off of Chris Sale, who was peak Chris Sale then. He wasn't touched during the course of the season. He was really, really good, especially a slider. But it was really odd to watch a game where nobody swung at a slider. They only swung at fastballs. And to see Altuve get 3 home runs in that game was something.
Yeah. When you and Mo are doing a game, and I know you call with different partners, but that's primarily when I hear you. How much of that are you guys trying to point out, and whose job is it to do that, or do you just kind of eat that because you don't want to put cheating on any team without knowing more?
I've kind of put it away because you have to. You got to look to today and tomorrow. Mo brings it up though. He talks about the trash cans and stuff. But when we play Houston, and people don't know this, a few years ago, it was 2021 maybe, or 2022, I think. I get a call from the Dodgers, and it was a series that I happened to be off when Houston was in. And they asked me, hey, would you mind doing a series for the Astros? Because one of their announcers got COVID on the last leg of the road trip, and they got to send him home.
Yeah.
And I said, you don't mind if I do that? And they're like, no. I go, what do you think our fans are going to think if I show up on Houston radio? They're like, yeah, that's in the past. Don't worry about it. They really need the help. They need somebody, and they can't get anybody in here. Can you do the next 3 games for them?
Yeah.
And so at the urging of the Dodgers, I did it. So I worked with Robert Ford, who's the regular play-by-play announcer, and Robert and I knew each other anyway. And we did 3 Houston Astros games at Dodger Stadium for the Astros, where I did I think 3 or 4 innings a game. They rotate the innings, and that's kind of how they did it. And I just sort of had to do baseball. I wasn't gonna go, here we are back with the cheating Astros, but I just kind of have pushed that, into the past. Because like any player is wired, I think we have to kind of be wired the same way at this point. So a player gets up there, has a bad at bat, or a player gets up there and drops a ball or makes an error. That it just happened. It's over. You can't do anything about it. It's over. You got to keep moving on. And so that's sort of the attitude that I've developed with this whole situation. When I was with the Red Sox, I lived through it in the postseason. I saw it up close and personal. I know exactly what trash can it was. I know exactly where it is. I know exactly the type of hard plastic it was made out of. I've been in that dugout. I know where it is. So I had a different perspective than a lot of folks because of my past history in baseball. But that's ancient history at this point in time. That was 2017. That's 8 years ago. 9 seasons ago now. The Dodgers have won a World Series since, or 2 World Series since, and are trying to get a 3rd since. And I think at some point you have to just put it away. Most of those guys are gone. There's 1 or 2 remain. And I think once Altuve is done and he's out of there, I think people will kind of brush it. It'll go into the history books. People can put an asterisk on it if they want. You still got to hit the ball, which is hard.
Still got to hit the ball. Yeah.
That's what you say about people from the steroid era, right?
Sure.
Just because you were on steroids didn't mean you were going to go up there and make contact.
Yeah.
It's still, you still have to have the hand-eye coordination to make contact at the major league level. So not that I'm saying I should forgive them either, because they were not only bending, but busting the rules in a big way. But at the same time, baseball is where it is now, and that's where my head's got to be.
Yeah. And the steroid era is complex because I don't think we've properly named it. There were a lot of changes. You and I were approximately the same age, but when we were young, if you lifted weights, you got muscle bound and couldn't play baseball. That turned out to be false. We stopped drinking beer between innings and started, eating healthier. We expanded the league 4 times, and during the strike years when they settled, they expanded the roster back to 25 players. That's 5 teams worth of players that were flooded into baseball. And then, so of course, the offense explodes because the pitching caliber has to be balanced out. A lot of things happened.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it wasn't just the
video.
hitters either, though.
Oh,
the
no,
pitchers
for
were
sure.
doing it too. And there are guys I was around in the big leagues that I had my suspicions. I'd see a guy come into spring training, and he looked like he'd been working out with Arnold Schwarzenegger all winter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was at Venice Beach, and he was built like a tree. And then the next year he'd come in, and he looked like his own little brother. So you wonder what happened for that year, and you don't just get inflated and deflated in 365 days. But I've seen it. I saw it, and guys got away with it. And I've also been present when I see the people coming in to take the samples, and I've been there when people have been busted. So you don't see much of that anymore. Guys are on the straight and narrow as much as they possibly can be now. Occasionally, when you see a problem with performance enhancers, typically it's in the minor leagues now. Largely, and I think a lot of it was you had a lot of players who were good players, but felt they needed to be better for some reason, and they said, "Oh, I can take this, and I'm going to be better." And what it was about at the time was it wasn't about building muscle so much. That was a byproduct of it. It was about recovery. Sure. Yeah. So a normal human can't lift hard 7 days a week, right? But the way that the different steroids were used was it would help you recover way faster. So you could lift 7 days a week, and the byproduct of that was the strength that you develop. I think you probably lacked some flexibility, but you would develop, great strength. And there were guys who did it. There were guys who didn't. There were people who were accused of it. There were people who were close to it and didn't go over the edge, who are still being looked upon that they were in the wrong. And we've got a guy like Roger Clemens not in the Hall of Fame, right? His tests were negative. Yeah. So they're basing that on a he said situation rather than the science. So I don't know. That was an ugly era of baseball when it broke down.
Yeah, and the other thing is we also don't know the deleterious effects. If you're just doing this experimenting, probably better at this kind of thing now. But back then, you could tear muscle off a bone and tendons, and there's also the negative side. Also, by the way, would Jose Canseco have been as crazy as he was in the late '80s if he wasn't doing a bunch of steroids? He was just so wacky. I mean, he was powerful and fast, but he couldn't drive a car straight. He couldn't stay out of fights with his wife. I mean, it was bananas crazy.
I think some of that was built in anyway with him. Probably my guess. He's still that way. I think there's part of him. I can't speak for him, but I would imagine that there's part of him that's pretty resentful. But I don't think his book helped him very much. Talking about injecting himself all the time, and the people that he named in the book, certainly he's not happy with their reaction, and they're not happy with being named either. Right. So I think that kind of hurt, and it hurt baseball at the time. Yeah. So I think a lot of the younger generation of baseball probably never read the book, and there were a lot of people in baseball who thought some of that stuff in there was fantasy and fiction. Maybe some was, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I don't want to talk too much more about steroids, but also we have the perfect case study with him and his twin brother, genetically the same person. And one of them was a Hall of Fame grade player, and the other one was barely a major leaguer. And so like, what do we know about the impact of steroids? It's tough to say. And it's tough enough to say that I'm not comfortable throwing players away because of that, because of all of the other things. The league controls the quality of the ball, and there's a lot of factors that go into this. It doesn't absolve anybody of breaking the rules, but I'm also, it's been a long time, and we now understand a lot more of what we don't know, and I'm just kind of willing to let it slide for the most part.
So like the Astros thing, it's it's part of the past. You acknowledge it, but it's not part of the present. So you just move on.
Yeah. 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 When you start, I mean, you have a dream job, right? But you also are the guy in the WKRP song, up and down the dial, moving around, right? Because you're trying to find the next market, the next gig, trying to find stability early on in your career. When did you realize, like, actually, this is going to work out? Like, I get to live, a life and make money doing this incredible thing. When did that happen for you?
Not right away, because I mean, I was lucky. I got to start at a really young age.
Yeah.
So, you never realize that it's going to work until you get out of the minor leagues. And I was in the minor leagues for a while, long time, and had to be. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of the broadcasters that we have today should have been the ones that didn't spend any time in the minors. I think it's an injustice. I shouldn't say injustice. I should say it would be better for their development learning the game that way.
Yeah.
Because you learn the game a lot differently when you've come through the minor leagues than when somebody says, "Hey, you're going to be our new project," and there you get in there. You're now a major leaguer. You're 23 years old. Go ahead, start. I don't resent those guys. It might sound like it, but I don't. Good for them that there's enough jobs. But I do think that for people's development, it's better to start on the way up. Like for example, my oldest son is in AAA. He's been there for 5 years. He started doing college, wood bat summer league stuff. Then he went to be a media relations assistant, part-time broadcaster with Birmingham in AA. And then a single A opportunity came up the next year where he could be the full-time guy in the Florida State League. He went down there to Bradenton, did that for 2 years before the AAA opportunity opened. He was ready to start the AAA thing, and then COVID started. So they had to lay him off like the day he was supposed to start. So he missed that year out in Las Vegas. So he went and worked in a sports book for a year and did some other radio things. And then they brought him back, and he's been back with them since. So, he had to learn the hard way. He had to put on boots and pull the tarp. He had to write the media notes. He had to do all the things that you need to learn to do on the way up, rather than just be thrown in the booth and stuff like that. But as far as when I thought it might work out was, I was doing a lot of different things when I got my first major league opportunity with the Colorado Rockies. And I was doing a lot of things for the TV network there that was their rights holder. So it was just kind of a part-time thing, the baseball thing, but I did a lot of studio work. I did a lot of other things, football, hockey, basketball. And when I got the call from the Pittsburgh Pirates after going through the process, because I had interviewed a couple years earlier with the Milwaukee Brewers and was down the end, and I thought I was going to get that job. I really did. And then they hired Brian Anderson instead of me. And they called me and said, "We tried to split the schedule, give you half and him half, but the owner just said no." And the funny thing was, the day I went to interview, the owner was at a funeral. And Brian came the next day, and the owner was back. And the owner just simply said to the people doing the process, "Look, just hire the guy I met with. All right." And this is what the Brewers people told me. Well, it turned out great for Brian. I mean, Brian is just done. He's got our game tonight with the Phillies, and Brian and I are good friends, and we know this. He knows the story, and we've been very good friends since. But 2 years later, I was hired by the Pirates. And when I started doing that full time and didn't have to, I didn't have to concern myself with any other things, chasing freelance work and things like that. That's when I said to myself, "Yeah, this is going to be pretty good."
Yeah, I know. I'm acquainted with Boog Sciambi, but because my buddy Phil, because Boog's got a passion about ALS and everything.
Yeah, he does. Yep.
He is one of those guys that he gets the phone rings, he says yes, and he grabs his suitcase and he goes, and he is just a guy. He just wants to do it, and and maybe he can't say no to things, but there's a balance there, right? Like, this is good enough. I don't need to go on the road all the time, and a lot of opportunities come up. I don't want to be on the road. I'm getting too old for that. Charlie Snyder backs off, that kind of thing, opens up a slot. So all of these things happen, but how do you manage that? Like, when the phone rings and they're like, how about, and then they give you the opportunity, how do you manage your career? Because that seems to be a scary thing, where if you're the guy that says no, you don't get called.
That's a good point, and that's what I tell a lot of younger broadcasters. I said, if they say, "Hey, would you come broadcast this Tiddlywinks competition?" You say yes, and you go do it. And I mean, I've done that. I've done things, not Tiddlywinks. I've done one that's close. But yeah, you're right, and especially when you're trying to make a name for yourself in the business, when the phone rings, and believe me, it doesn't always ring. You have to get to a point before it starts ringing.
Right.
And when it does, you don't say no usually. If you're available, you do it. I mean, right now, I got talked to a couple of weeks ago about filling in for my own son in Las Vegas, because he also does UNLV football and basketball, and they do simulcasts, and they're going to move him to television. And they asked me if I'd be interested in doing the radio. Now, for me, it's not a get-rich scheme at all. It's just kind of a neat thing to do, and kind of a full circle thing where I get to fill in for my own kid. And it'd be kind of a fun thing, because I used to do games there too a long time ago. But, I mean, I don't think I've ever, when the phone rang, said, no, I don't want to do that. I mean, I've had calls about things like swimming and diving, track and field. And I've done it. I've done both indoor and outdoor track and field. I broadcast that. I've done the swimming and diving. I've worked with, one of the best swimming analysts in the world. And if I didn't, I would have really, really regretted it, because I would have been completely lost. Working with Rowdy Gaines on the only swimming I've ever done. And it was like, okay, just wind him up and let him go. And I'm just setting the table for him. And it was really good. That was hard work for me, but you have to prepare for these things. And one of my first jobs out of college, I got a call asking if I would be willing to do play-by-play on a corporate video for Toys R Us. It was called the National Scan and Bag Competition, where you would scan, like, these were the cashiers, where they would scan the items and bag them. And they had contests in every state, and every state winner was coming to New York. This was a former college teammate of mine who was in charge of this corporate video thing. So we hired another teammate of mine, and he was the analyst. And we went to New York and we did this competition. And I'm like, man, this is weird. Like, this is what it's going to be like doing whatever they ask.
Yeah.
I've done at the Olympics, I've done some things that I wasn't prepared for, like, and there I was under contract, so I didn't have a choice. I got told with less than 24 hours before an event that I had to do Iraq and Portugal in qualification soccer.
Right.
And actually, that one was I think 15 minutes before the match, 10 or 15 minutes before the match. But the other one with 24 hours, I had to do women's freestyle aerials, which I'd never even seen before. Had to learn it in less than 24 hours. And I did 120 meter long hill ski jumping alone without an analyst. I had to do that one. So I had to learn the techniques of that. I actually enjoyed that one. That was fun. Because you don't have to say much. You're on television, so you just let them, the microphones do a lot. When they get in the starting thing, the skis move back and forth. You can hear the crunch of the ice. And, here's Georg Schmidt from Germany. He's third currently on the World Cup standings. And, His longest is 120 meters or whatever. And then it goes beep, 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 right? And then you just let them go. Yeah. And the graphics come up and it tells you how long it was. You don't have to add anything or subtract anything. So it was kind of a system that they told me to expect. But I did that one on short notice too. But you do you do a lot of things. But for me, it all came back to baseball.
Right.
And before I had kind of a funny story. Before I did a game with the Pirates, we got hired by the Pirates. The Big Ten Network wanted to try me out. They wanted to see if I could do baseball, but they didn't have any baseball games. And they sent me to Iowa City to do Iowa Michigan State softball. So I go there, I do the game, 7 innings. I mean, it was like a blink of an eye. Supposed to be a doubleheader, ended up being 1 game. And then the feedback I got from Big Ten Network was that I wasn't very good at baseball. And literally, like, it was a few months later, I got hired by the Pirates full time. And then after I got hired by the Pirates, the Big Ten Network called me back, and then they had me do track and field. They had me do swimming and diving. They had me do football.
Yeah.
For some reason, they never let me do basketball, even though I was almost begging them. Like, that's my free time of the year. Why don't you have me on your basketball roster? You got 1 million games. But I was doing basketball for other networks across the country. And it was just really a funny story where they told me that I don't think I could do baseball. But, here I am like 20 years later, still doing it.
That's a great career. Yeah, that's funny. But a buddy of mine is Johnny Mosley, who won gold in Nagano in freestyle. And so he turned himself into a TV analyst. And he's like, I know all this stuff, and his tricks relate to, snowboarding and all that. But still, he's like, I couldn't just wing it. I had to prepare. And you would think, like, just because you're of that culture, but you have to actually work at it. It actually is a job, a profession. It's interesting to hear people talk about that.
Yeah, you can't mail it in. I mean, granted, baseball is a day-to-day thing, and you could easily mail it in, right? But you can't. You have to be up on everything. You got to be up on the numbers. You got to be up on the who's who. And I'll tell you this about Rick Monday. How many games has Rick Monday done in his life, right? He's done about 1 million of them. He could mail it in every day, but he doesn't. I've worked with baseball analysts outside of the Dodgers that, because they played, they sit down and they're like, yeah, I played. I can just make observations, and they don't have anything ready. And they try to be funny and things like that. And that's all well and good. But Rick is prepared. I mean, he'll come in and he'll say, hey, this guy's average, with 2 strikes is this against left-handers. I mean, he's got every number ready to go, and he works at it. I mean, he shows up to the booth. He'll open up his scorebook, and he's already got a lot of notes in there that he's been sitting in the hotel or preparing all day. Yeah. So, that's what makes him the pro that he is. And that's what makes, I know a lot of people around the Dodgers don't mail it in either. There's a lot of research and things that go on a daily basis. Yeah. But there's a lot of broadcasters around baseball that, former players that I'm not going to name names, but they just show up because of who they are, and they try to be funny and tell jokes and make an observation, and they don't have the research. They don't, they're just there because they're a personality. And, for me as a play-by-play guy, that's a little harder. It puts more pressure on me to have every bit of information, as opposed to certain bits that we can work off of each other. I know the things that Rick likes to talk about, so I let him prepare those. Sure. Not that I let him. He does it anyway, but I don't have to focus on those types of things because I know that's what he likes, and I have the things that I like to prepare for. So between the both of us, we got pretty much everything covered.
Yeah, it's neat. You guys' call is awesome, and I listen to quite a few calls from different teams because I enjoy that, and because of that, I've become a bit of an aficionado. I definitely don't like it when a color guy is just full of cliches and says things that you could say about any player. It just doesn't grab my attention. Now, some of them are characters. I will say this on the good side of all of that, not that he didn't prepare, but. Man, I used to live in Chicago, and Chicago loved Ron Santo, and he loved them back. And you could hear him, oh my gosh, him and Pat. And Pat was hilarious. He'd be all dry and funny. And so there was something bigger there. We're like, yes, the game was going on, but you also were hanging out with these 2 dudes. Mm-hmm. And, that doesn't work in every market, but oh my God. And so I don't know, like, do we have teams like that where there's just like this love affair with someone like Ron Santo, or are those days kind of gone and it's a little more corporate?
No, I think they're still there. Ron was awesome. And when I was a younger broadcaster with the Pirates, the way the radio booth is configured there, you got the Cubs booth, and then the visiting booth is just to the left, and there's just a piece of glass that would separate us. And I used to sit on the right, and Ronnie would sit on the left. So basically, if there was no glass there, we'd be shoulder to shoulder. So during the game, he'd give me a knock on the window or something if something big happened, or whatever. But he when I first got there, he was so welcoming and so nice, and full of information, but also full of passion because he was a Cub. One of the worst days of his career was when he had to go play for the White Sox. But because he was such a diehard Cub, people loved him. One guy I think of off the top of my head, well, a couple guys. One of the guys I worked with who's just he's just a lovable teddy bear of a guy. He's a hulking guy, but is Bob Walk with the Pirates. Now Bob doesn't prepare very much. Bob just takes the score sheet that's provided every day. He doesn't do his own book or anything like that. And he just sits there and watches and observes and makes comments, and he's funny and he fractures the English language. And, but people love him because he's who he is. And he was a Pirate during the winning days of the early 90s. John Kruk in Philadelphia on TV. John is just John. And literally John kind of just shows up. And then on Sundays, Mike Schmidt comes in the booth. And because of Mike Schmidt and who he is, they love him. There's a lot of examples, I think, of guys like that around the game. But, even back in Chicago, Ronnie Coomer to a point, because he's one of them. Right?
Yeah, he fits in well.
Yeah, and Ronnie's, he preps. He knows what's happening. He's also keeping tabs on his bar that he owns. But he's a good guy. Like he'll give Rick and I rides back from Wrigley to the hotel. He's a good guy. I saw Ronnie play when he was with the Twins in the minor leagues in AAA. I used to see him a lot. But they like Ron in Chicago. But yeah, I do think there are people. I think to an extent in LA, people get used to Rick Monday's voice. But Rick is more of a broadcaster / player than just a player, right? Because late in Rick's career, he was a sports anchor on Channel 11 in Los Angeles. People forget that. He was an anchor reporter during the offseason, and he was really good. And so he looks at things a little bit differently than most former players do when he comes in. He does look at things from a journalistic standpoint. And when he gets going on the air, he can be really, really good in certain moments, especially. And I think of the night that Vin Scully died, and we were in San Francisco, and we were told, like in the top of the fifth inning, I think, that he had passed. We had known for about a month or so that he was in hospice, and it could be any day, and to have something prepared to go. And those were the days I was going back and forth between TV and radio, so I had to have something ready, no matter which medium I was on that night. So I happened to be on radio with Rick. And so we knew, but we were told we couldn't say anything until the family said it was okay. So another half inning or so went by. Now, Rick knew Vin very well. I mean, very well. So he was, he was shaken, obviously, but trying to do his best as a professional broadcaster, too, that we're on the air and we can't say anything yet. So finally we get the okay to talk about it, and we're coming back from break. And I just looked at him and I said, look, you knew him way longer than me. I said, why don't you just take it back, talk as long as you want, do what you need to do. And he did. And he was just eloquent with what he was doing. And it was all off the top of his head. It was remarkable. And the game became secondary at that point. I couldn't tell you to this day if we won or lost the game. I think we won. I don't know.
Good, easy guess. You guys won a lot.
I really don't know. But I do remember Giants president Larry Baer coming into our booth in the seventh inning and talking to us and expressing his condolences off the air. And he said, look, we're not going to announce this until the game's over because we don't know who in your dugout had a relationship with him or not, and we don't want to affect the integrity of the game, which I thought was really smart on the Giants' part.
Right.
So as soon as the game was over, they stopped it. Usually there's post-game music blaring and whatever, and of course you got the huge pterodactyl-sized seagulls that attack all the food there. I mean, it's a show every game after the games in San Francisco, and you can hear them all over the place for a while. You could hear that only because they shut the music off. They put a picture of Vin up, birth date, date of death, and people realized what it meant. and everybody turned around. The umpires, everybody stopped, turned around, and this spontaneous applause broke out from everybody. Players who hadn't left the field yet turned around. Everybody's staring at the scoreboard, and all you can hear are the seagulls. And it was an amazing thing. But what led into that with Rick and how he handled it was, if you just want to separate the moment and say, okay, it was a spectacular piece of broadcasting on the part of Rick.
Yeah, I love that. And big hat tip to the Giants. I'm a Bay Area guy, so I know a lot about the Giants. I know people from that community and family. And when Vin wrapped up his career up there, and there's a plaque in the booth with his name on it, and they carried his air. That's incredible.
Because they get it. They understood the moment. It's not just a broadcaster resigning. This is baseball history resigning. And because of the fact he goes back to those days in Brooklyn when he was 23 years old, working with Red Barber. I mean, hardly anybody is still alive who remembers those days. But Vin was not only alive, but working. And, he was such a great ambassador for the sport itself. Even though he did other sports, he did golf. A lot of people forget he did golf, but he was really good at golf.
Did golf well.
Yeah, he was really good at it. He did, of course, football was really good. He did, speaking of Bay Area, he was the guy that called the catch, the Montana to Dwight Clark. That, Vin was on TV for that game, and it was a really great call. But, his Dodger work superseded all of it. And to this day, it's still remarkable. I remember sitting in the booth my first year with the Dodgers, first TV game, and I knew where Vin had sat. I had been in the booth with him in the past anyway and sat and talked with him. But now I was sitting at his vantage point. I don't know if it was the same chair or not, maybe not, but it was the same place that chair was, looking out, that he had that same view for all those years. And, I was pinching my leg going, how the hell did I get here? And I'm watching the game from that viewpoint. And I never lost sight of that. I always felt it was appropriate, and still do. I feel it's appropriate to wear a tie and jacket and tie in that booth, regardless of the weather. That's something that the Dodgers have kind of softened on. They don't really think about it anymore. And in fact, I was told one night I had to wear a polo, even though I had a jacket and tie on. And I was like, we're on hallowed ground here. We got to show respect. But anyway, as time goes on, that changes, I guess. And never forgotten Vin. And the first time I saw him at Dodger Stadium, I was with the Pirates, and I walked by the booth, and he called my name. And I'd been just by the booth, and I stopped. And I kind of walked backwards and stuck my head in the doorway, and he goes, come on in here. I'm like, oh, my God. So I go in and sit down with him. We talked for quite a while, and I felt like $10 million when I left the booth.
Yeah.
I mean, he just had that way of making you feel like you're the most important thing in the world. And it was really an incredible experience. And then I tell the story as kind of a joke, but it's true. The next year, same thing. I walk by his booth. He goes, "Hey, Tim," and I lean back. I think he's going to say, "Hey, Tim," but I walk by and he goes, "Hey, Tom," and I was like, "You got 2 of the 3 letters right. That's good enough for me." So that was fine. But he was such a gentleman and was great to me. And I've got a voicemail saved from him that I don't keep many voicemails. I have one from my dad, one from my mom, and one from Vin. That's it.
Yeah.
So
that's so great. I have a little Vince Scully story. So the Dodgers are great to offer us. I don't know how many podcasts had been in studio or in stadium before us, but it was a long time ago now. And so because Vin was working still, and we were there, and it was Frank Sinatra night. So Frank Sinatra Jr. was there throwing out the first pitch and singing a song probably. But we we got there, and our parking spot was like right next to Vin's spot. Like we got out and walked about 40 feet, and we're in the stadium. We felt like just like on top of the world. The Dodgers did such a great job rolling out the red carpet for us. We talked to DJ Severe. He was our guest that day. And so John and I are looking around like we can get root beer floats. We were just having a great time. And so we go to the bathroom, and Vin Scully's going to the bathroom with us. That's already a pretty great story. We're like, wow, we're going to the bathroom with Vin Scully, because he's such an icon. We didn't make a big deal about it, but I think maybe John and him exchanged a word or two. And then we walked out, and we were just like tourists, like just having a great time, doing all this stuff. And John turns to me like this, and right as he does, here comes Vin into that elbow. Bam! And he's like, oh, no. Thought he killed – John's a black belt, pretty strong guy. He thought he'd killed Vin Scully. And Vin brushed it out. I was like, I'm tougher than that, kid, and just kept on trucking. But it's just like such a cool thing where he was totally ready with he didn't have to even think about it. He just has the words at the ready, and it was just such a cool thing. He easily could have, fallen on the ground. It could have been a big deal because he was pretty old, but brushed it off and was like it was no big deal. And he's such a neat man. And everybody I've talked to, and actually I know one of his nephews, and they all just rave about him. It's great to be known in that way, where everybody has something positive to say about you, and not just because you're on the radio, but just because he was a good person.
Yeah, he was very well respected, and he was all about his grandkids too. So
yeah,
he was very, very involved with everything they did, and he had to he lived up in the Hidden Hills, I think it is, up in the valley, up off the 101. So there were certain days he had quite a commute, depending on the traffic, but he spent a lot of time at his house, not just getting ready. He was on the phone. You call him, he answers the phone. It's like people don't expect that, but he's just like anybody else.
Yeah.
Phone rings, which we're conditioned to answer the phone, right?
Yeah.
So, but he was, he was a wonderful guy and the best ambassador I think a team could ever want. I mean, we still see Vin Scully shirts and hats and stuff all around the ballpark to this day. And there's going to be a time. I don't think there'll ever be a time where we won't. I think his legend, as it gets passed down from generation to generation, is still going to grow. It's just, the press box is named after him. They've got photos of him everywhere. They got, different things to memorialize his time with the Dodgers. So, but he's cast a big shadow, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is for sure. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. How do you look ahead? Like, what you want to become in the league? Do you worry about legacy? Are you still trying to be a better announcer? All those things. Like, how do you measure that? I mean, and is Vin the bar, or do you even worry about that?
He's the bar. He's the bar for sure. But you can't try to be him.
Right.
You can't come on the air and go, it's time for Dodger baseball. You can't do that. Right. Yeah. That's why they do it on the field. That they do that to remember him. You got to be yourself. You got to do it your way. You got to, it's like a player. Do what got you there. Right. And keep doing it and then improve it and work at it. And it's not like just because we get to the big leagues and you're broadcasting in major league games or broadcasting games with the Dodgers that you're like, okay, phew, made it. Now I don't have to, now I can just kind of cruise. No, you work hard every day. You got to be ready every day, every game. My thing is I try to come up with stuff, a handful of things each day that nobody knows about, that you're not going to read in the papers. You're not going to read on your blog. And how do you do that? Well, that's partially a lot of conversation. I go down and ask people questions. I go down and see people, shake hands with people, get to know, players and coaches. And oftentimes I get a great story and I'll ask them, hey, can I use that? Sometimes we have an innocuous conversation with somebody, I'll just use it anyway because it's not a big deal. And the players do expect that, they see the broadcasters down there. You start talking about hitting or the game the night before that. Yeah, you're going to use that. They sort of know you're going to do that. But you don't put people in a bad spot. You're not going to believe what this guy told me. You're not going to do that. But you do put that in the memory banks, and you hear a lot of things that you never use because you don't want to make anybody look a certain way. So I think that with you try to do what Vin did. I know how Vin did some of it. I've had a peek behind the curtain. I know the guy who was in the booth with him all those years. And because when I first started with the Dodgers, he was still there, and he worked with me in the booth for a couple of years. A guy by the name of Boyd Robertson. Boyd was the wizard behind the curtain.
Yeah.
He was the other person in the booth with Vin that no one ever knew about. A player would come in from the bullpen. He would look the stuff up real quick, give it to Vin. Because as you're broadcasting, it's hard to look up stuff unless you have a partner who's talking and taking the air at that time. Now you have time to look things up. You can't always do that when you're by yourself. So Boyd would be there, and he would be thinking along with Vin, and really helped him out a lot. And he used to travel with Vin. He came to a point where he didn't as much anymore. And I saw Boyd this year. He just filled in for a series with somebody, and it's always great to see him. But I always looked at Boyd, and I used to, I always told him I was honored to have the opportunity to work with him. And he asked me one day, my first year, he goes, "Do you like Jolly Ranchers?" And I said, "Yeah, they're okay." Why? He goes, "Well, because Vin always had one in his mouth." And I said, "I never knew that." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "So it's kind of part of my job to make sure we were always loaded up with Jolly Ranchers." And these are little things that, like, a lot of people don't know, And like when I first met Vin, I didn't know he was left-handed until he was asking me questions about the team, and then I saw him writing in his scorebook, and it was left-handed. I never knew he was a lefty. So things like little things you learn along the way, but you do learn some of the tricks and some of the secrets. There's a new wizard behind the curtain now that works with Joe Davis. And he shares his research with all of us, which is great. So there are some, industry secrets that are still out there, where there are support personnel that are really important to what we do that help us stay at the level that we're at and try to achieve even higher. So,
when, at my best, if I've got a good conversation going and I've got two guests or a co-host, whatever, man, I love to Vin Scully. I just sit way back in the back seat. I just let the show hum because I've done the job. I've got everybody talking, and I just absolutely, that's the Vin Scully School of Broadcasting thing that I've got going, And so I just let the person or the two people talk, and it's remarkable where they go. And I don't have to guide it. I don't have to ask a question. They'll just go, or just ask the silent question. Just say nothing and let them ask their own question and answer it. It's all like his fingerprints on how I interpret his work in my world.
I think a lot of television broadcasters, producers included, have learned a lot from him over the years. And basically, when there's a big play, when there's a big home run, something like that, call it and get out of the way. And let the cameras, let the microphones, let the technical director who's cutting it in the truck, let them do their job. And that's one of the things that I learned before I got to the Dodgers. And then when I got there and was doing a lot more television, if there was a big home run or something, I remember being in the booth in 2019, a game against the Padres. I was with Nomar Garciaparra, and Nomar was involved in the 4+1 game, right, where he hit the walk-off in the 10th after they had hit 4 to tie it up. And so this happened to be the inverse of that night, where the Dodgers needed one, they got one, then they got 4 to win it. And so I just happened to be with him. Corey Seager had a big night that night. I think he had 2, I want to say. A couple other guys had big home runs, but there were those moments where the place was going crazy, and you just know that when the ball leaves the ballpark, it's gone. And then you just kind of, and the Dodgers, tied it or something, and you just let it roll. And they're taking crowd shots, and they're following the run around the bases. And then they go back to reaction shots. Now a dugout shot, all these things. And that's part of television that I think Vin taught a lot of us is, you're part of the crew. You're not the show. You're part of the show. Let the show be the show, and let everybody do their work. Radio's a little different. You can lay out a little bit on radio and let the crowd fill in, but you can only do that for so long because you're not hearing anything but the crowd. So you give a little bit more information on the home runs on the radio, where ball's gone, the game's tied, that's his 13th of the year, the Dodgers, it's 4-4. Oh, what a great time for that. And then you kind of lay out from it and let the crowd go crazy. And then Rick comes in with his Daniels Jewelers promo. So,
yeah.
That's kind of the difference between TV and radio. And, with me, I've been one of the fortunate few to be able to do it on both sides, like Vin used to, but not the same way later in his career when he simulcast. But he did both, individually. But when you move from one to the other, it's a different call. Yeah. You have to treat it differently. Yeah. But with the television thing, it's just kind of lay out, let it happen, let everybody do their job. And you sort of get a sense once the play is kind of crescendoed and they're back to the dugout and everybody's high-fiving. It's a good time to get back in and catch people up on, they probably show a graphic, 13th home run of the year or whatever. And that's fine too. Yeah. But because on TV, graphics do a lot of your work. You don't have to give the score as much. You don't have to say as much. You don't even have to acknowledge the graphics sometimes. Because that TV, you kind of get away with a lot more. It's more of a conversational medium where you want to bring your analyst in. But in Vin's case, you just wanted to hear him tell stories and talk about people. So,
do you get time for one more question real quick? We're already right now at an hour. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things I love is the big machine as it's working, right? And so I've had a number of people on who were at the World Series in '88 when Gibson hits the homer, and so there's the story of Vin Scully basically calling out Kirk Gibson for not being ready, and Kirk's like, "God damn it, I'm gonna get ready," and then Tommy comes back and he's like, "Can you go?" And Kirk kind of grunts at him, and so Tommy, like a boss, just walks away, not ready to hear anything else. He's just gonna pull the trigger. So Ned Colletti he's in the A's dugout getting ready to do his media job and get the winners and get the response. And all of a sudden, Kirk hits this home run. And Ned's like, "I'm in the wrong dugout." And so he's got to change. So while everybody else's pandemonium is going on. And by the way, while all that happens, Andy Friedman, who takes photos for the NBA and baseball, is running onto the field ahead of everybody else because he's got to get to the spot to get the shot from the right angle. So all of these people are doing their job in the moment. And I don't know if they're enjoying the moment or not. I don't know if Vin danced a little jig or something, but all this stuff is going on. And not a soul is aware of it because we're watching Kurt fist pump his hand and just the crowd go bananas and brake lights go up on the 405. All that stuff happens. It's just a remarkable thing about that. The sport is there's all these people who are in the moment, ready to tell the story. And then all of a sudden the story can change. And then the story still gets told, but it's a different story now.
Yeah. And I think it was Bob Costas, who was one of the reporters on the broadcast, who reported that Gibson was unavailable. And then Vin repeated that, and he said, we're told he's unavailable or something. I can't remember the exact words he used. Yeah. And I know the clubhouse guy who was down there, who worked for the Dodgers for many years. He was grabbed. Gibson grabbed him and said, "Hey, start tossing me some baseballs. Give me my spikes," because he was in tennis shoes at the time, and he said, "Give me some spikes." He put his spikes on. And when he started swinging the bat, and then he told the clubby to go up and tell Tommy. He goes, "Gibby's ready. He can hit." He goes, "What?" He goes, "He's in there swinging right now. He can hit." And so he's like, "Okay." And then the famous line, "And look who's coming up."
Oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of things that happen in the moment. That was a big one. That certainly was a big home run. And the thing is, I've heard it from Dennis Eckersley's side too. When I was with Boston, I worked with Dennis, and I've had, I've been very fortunate to have plenty of private conversations with him, and that was one of them on a number of times. I remember being we had a car service in New York to take us to the ballpark. We didn't ride with the team when I was with the Red Sox. I don't know why, but we didn't. But they used to send an SUV for the TV broadcasters, and I would jump in with them. And I remember we were in traffic one time going from Midtown down to the Bronx, and he told the whole story. And I mean, this driver in the car was just fascinated the whole time. This was the quietest driver I've ever heard. He didn't want to miss a word of it. But basically, Ron Hassey was catching. And what Dennis told me was the scouting report on Gibson was if the count gets to 3-2, backdoor slider, he's a sucker for it, can't hit it. So they were automatically going to go 3-2 backdoor slider.
Yeah.
So Hasse puts down the sign for slider. Bring it. Let's go. We're going to get out of the inning here. And Eck threw the pitch. And Gibby went down, and I don't know how he muscled it out, but he did. The ball hit the bat in the perfect spot. And then he limped his way around and fist pumped his way around the bases, and the Dodgers get the win. So, and the thing about Eck is that he's been so gracious over the years. He's made many appearances with Gibson. They've done a number of TV shows together and talked about it, done documentaries. And he was the first guy to stand up in the clubhouse for the A's and talk about it. A lot of guys would hang their head. Today they'd go out to the podium. But back then, they didn't have that. The clubhouse was crushed, and they used to bring in reporters in waves. So he had to repeat everything. He had to get the same questions over and over again. He told me, he goes, because nobody ever thinks of that. He goes, I'm standing there. Yeah. This group of reporters leaves, and they bring in another group, and I got to answer the same questions again.
Yeah.
He goes, but this is part of my job. I got to do it. And he did it all the time as a player. Whether he was with Cleveland, Boston, or the A's, wherever he was, he always stood up, win or lose. Because he said that's what a teammate's supposed to do. He goes, I don't want them asking my teammates about what I did. He goes, that's not their job to answer questions about something that I did or didn't do. So he would always stand up, and he sets a great example, I think, for a lot of young players.
Yeah, I love that. One of my favorite radio calls that nobody remembers, but Hank Greenwald, Giants playing the Dodgers. They're in Candlestick. Eddie Murray's a Dodger, and he's been battling injuries early in the season, and so he wasn't expected to play. And the Dodgers, late trying to rally, they load the bases, and we're outside the stadium because we're getting ready to leave. And Hank Greenwald's call, you don't know what's going to happen. Nobody's expecting Eddie, and he just goes, "Uh-oh." And then you knew it. You knew Big Bad Eddie was standing there in the on-deck circle about the bat. And of course, Eddie came through with the hit and drove in a couple of runs. But it's just amazing how can paint the entire picture. And I love it.
That was the Giants' perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate you. I just, if nobody else tells you, man, I thank you and Mo for what you guys do. Your call was wonderful, and thanks for spending time with me.
Oh, thanks, Pete. I appreciate it very much.
I'm going to hang up here with everybody. I got a show in about an hour, everybody. So come check that out. And Tim, I'll talk to you in a second.